Hello mortals, I'm the goddess who created the text world of Listernia, and I am highlighting some of my favorite LGBTQ plus authors and books for Pride Month. And you won't believe the book series that we're going to talk about right now. It is a wish fulfillment fantasy for some, but not all, but for some gay men. It's called the WRAETHTHU trilogy, written by Storm Constantine. The first book is The Enchantments of Flesh and Spirit, published in 1987, followed by The Bewitchments of Love and Hate, published in 1988, and concluding in The Fulfilments of Fate and Desire in 1989. What are the WRAETHTHU? They're a new breed of humans, Homo superior, replacing old Homo sapiens. The WRAETHTHU look like males in their late teens, early 20s, and they never show any sign of aging. Also, their metabolism makes it so they are incapable of gaining any weight, and they have no body or facial hair. So basically, they look like a race of twinks. Twinks, if you didn't know, is a term for skinny gay men of a certain youthful age without any body hair. Does a world of twinks turn you on or turn you off? But wait, there's more. The tone of the WRAETHTHU novels is very goth. It was published in the 80s, and there is a very distinct 80s element that is goth or maybe a little punk. But keep in mind, this was when the goth culture was just starting to mature. We'll talk more about that in a bit, but the simple truth is that we are reading about not just a world of twinks, but a world of goth twinks. Oh, and by the way, the WRAETHTHU have to have sex with other WRAETHTHU. It is an integral part of who they are. So the world is not just populated by goth twinks, but by horny goth twinks. The trilogy takes place in Earth's future, and it's not really a dystopian story, but it could be categorized as post-apocalyptic or maybe mid-apocalyptic. The apocalypse isn't a dramatic event like a nuclear war, but rather it's the slow motion extinction of the human race as they're replaced by the WRAETHTHU, the new breed of humans. There was a war at some point between the two races, but the WRAETHTHU won. But that's just a passing background reference or background story that's only briefly touched upon and not fully explained or developed. In order to understand what the goth element is in the books, we need to look at when it was written, which was the late 80s. Some people romanticize the 80s, but it wasn't all Madonna and Michael Jackson and Cyndi Lauper bopping around. There is also Bauhaus and the Ramones and Joy Division, which reflected for many of us what a really terrible time the 80s were to live in. First, there was the outbreak of AIDS, when there was no treatment or understanding of what AIDS was. If you were a gay man and had sex, you just had to come to terms with the fact that there was a chance you could die a horrible, horrible death. The religious right had a field day with that one. But also, the Cold War was in effect, and it's hard to articulate the nihilism that this infused into my generation, where you simply accepted the fact that a nuclear holocaust was inevitable and just around the corner, especially with Reagan elected. He was painted as a warmonger among some, and the USSR had a very unstable leadership in the early 80s. The 80s were very nihilistic, and you saw it in the punk and the new wave movements and the burgeoning goth subculture which was a precursor to the emo subculture. For me, emo is goth without the fashion and the coolness. If you want to get an idea of what the 80s invoked in many people, check out the movie Liquid Sky, an independent, very weird movie from the early 80s. The energy of that movie was very bleak yet artistic, glamorous yet dark, quirky yet filled with angst. For some reason, I got that same energy from the WRAETHTHU novel. That somehow Storm Constantine colored her world in that very angry existential malaise that many of us felt in the 80s. And it was quintessentially goth. So what about Homo sapiens? WRAETHTHU can infect humans with their WRAETHTHU-ness. If a human male is infected by a WRAETHTHU, there's a chance that that man will turn into a WRAETHTHU, and there's a chance he'll just die. If a human female is infected by a WRAETHTHU, she always dies. I recommended this novel to a lesbian friend of mine who said, "Oh my God, this is such a gay man's fantasy." And I said, "I think the author is a woman." And my friend said, "What? A woman wrote this? She must be filled with self-hatred." The truth is that the WRAETHTHU aren't actually male. They are a race of hermaphrodites. So it's not really a race of gay males, but their appearance and how they're described and act. And because they use the male pronoun, it's easy enough to think of them as a race of male twinks. I'm curious if this was written now, if Storm Constantine may have used a gender-neutral pronoun. But at the time it was written, in the late 80s, that concept didn't really exist. Well, I personally categorize this as a science fiction novel. There really isn't much science in it. In fact, the world is mostly low tech. But there is magic. The magic is based on real magic. And when I say real magic, I'm not opining on whether or not magic actually exists in our real world. Rather, I'm saying the author drew inspiration from real-world spiritual practices that use magical rites or rituals, like Hermetic or occult teachings, Golden Dawn, or Rosicrucian, or Crowleyan, that sort of thing. And of course, in the fictional world of the WRAETHTHU, their magic is unquestionably real, but of a more psychic nature. The story of the first book is about the relationship between Pell, who is a human boy who is seduced or recruited by the WRAETHTHU Kel, and who turns Pell into a WRAETHTHU. The plot is more of a journey of Pell and Kel through the changing world and meeting the different clans of the WRAETHTHU, but also it's a journey of their relationship. There is also a Lord of the Flies quality to the story, wherein this new world of the WRAETHTHU that's emerging has no rules and is populated by tribes that are trying to figure out how to form a society. In fact, the whole trilogy is about how a new society rises out of a world in chaos. The story feels very meandering, but even so, I felt it was fast-paced insofar that I was compelled to keep reading and turning pages. That said, it is more character-driven than plot-driven. The writing, in my opinion, is slightly uneven. It's written in the first-person point of view with Pell as a narrator in the first book. The characters are dark and intriguing, filled with a lot of passion and angst and complex motivations. Sometimes the writing is very clean and clear, and at other times the prose tends towards purple. But overall, I think the writing is very strong. The WRAETHTHU trilogy is a unique piece of work by a very unique author, and in my opinion, very queer, which makes it a perfect book to highlight for Pride Month. It may not appeal to everyone, but for those who like to entertain the fantasy of a world of horny goth twinks, I think you'll love it. I give the series my blessing. Please hit the thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't, and may all the books you read be blessed.